Imagine you stand under Carthage's walls and hear a sentence that makes the blood turn cold. You see Roman envoys point toward the gates. You feel every eye on your hands. Give up your weapons. The words land like a brand on skin because they sound calm. But calm is how a trap sounds when it closes. You step forward with the others, because refusing means war right now, today at the threshold. Therefore carts begin to roll. You watch spearheads and swords, shields and helmets, your city's teeth, pile into Roman stacks like harvested bones. You feel the weight leaving your arms, but it does not feel like safety. It feels like someone pries your fingers open one by one. You smell sweat and oiled leather and the sour fear that rises when a crowd pretends to be brave. The Romans do not smile. They count. They measure. Their calm stays intact. That is the moment the stomach tightens, because a conqueror who wants peace usually wants gratitude. But this calm wants emptiness. A second demand arrives. Not shouted. Not negotiated. Spoken as if it is already done. Leave the city. Move inland. Carthage must be abandoned. You feel it behind the ribs like a knife that does not cut skin, only certainty. The first demand is not the deal. The first demand is the test. Therefore, the second demand reveals the truth. Rome does not want obedience. Rome wants absence. You see faces around you shift in the same instant, confusion to disbelief to rage. A woman's jaw locks. A dockworker's hands shake. A priest's eyes go wide like someone watching a god die. Someone screams. Someone throws a stone. The Roman line tightens, shields sliding forward with a sound like doors slamming. But the city's roar rises, and it is not a roar for battle yet. It is a roar for existence. You run back through the gate because standing here means becoming a witness to your own deletion. Inside, the normal world collapses in a single afternoon. You see merchants abandon scales. You see children dragged by the wrist. You feel the streets clog as if the city itself tries to hold its breath. Panic spreads, but fury spreads faster because fear asks, what happens to us? And fury answers, never. Therefore, the whole city becomes a workshop of war. You grab tools because tools become weapons now. You rip bronze from temple doors. You see men pry metal plates from sacred statues, not because the gods lose importance, but because the gods become ammunition. The smell changes. Incense gives way to hot metal, burning charcoal, and the bitter tang of hammered bronze. You feel heat slap the face as furnaces wake up in alleys. Hammers strike like heartbeat. The city begins to manufacture itself into a spear. Women pull hair from their own heads, thick coils twisted into bowstrings. You see fingers bleeding, but nobody stops. Therefore, pain becomes a tool. A mother ties off a cut with cloth and keeps twisting. You carry buckets of water not to drink, but to temper blades. You see a boy no older than 10 pump bellows until his arms tremble. You feel shame for a second, then the Romans outside erase shame with the thought of chains. Someone says the Romans already plan markets for survivors, already name prices for bodies. You don't know if it is true, but the rumor moves like fire because it fits. The first Roman lines tighten around the city. You climb a wall with blistered palms and see their camps multiply. But the horizon stays uncertain. You don't know how many legions wait beyond what the eye can count. You hear the sea behind you, once a mouth that feeds you, now a locked door. Therefore, every wave feels like mockery. Days compress into a single problem: how to keep the walls standing one more night. You feel mortar crumble under fingernails as you press stones back into place. You smell pitch as defenders smear it where ladders might bite. At night, you listen for the Roman approach, but you also listen for the city's own hunger. The belly growls in the dark. It is loud enough to feel. Grain shrinks to handfuls. A handful becomes a ration. A ration becomes a memory. Therefore, the body changes. Cheeks hollow, temper sharp, eyes always scanning. Water becomes a patrol route. You walk to a cistern with a spear made yesterday from a melted idol, and the absurdity hits like nausea. But there is no time to vomit. Therefore, the spear stays in hand. Scouts return with conflicting reports. One says the Roman camps look thin at the edge, as if the line stretches too far. Another swears fresh ships keep landing men and supplies. You don't know which voice tells the truth, but the wall needs bodies in every place. Therefore, commanders argue in hushed bursts, and you feel the arguments as delays that cost blood. The Roman siege does not feel like a single fist. It feels like a tightening rope. Every day the rope grips a little more. But Carthage does not die quietly. Therefore, the harbor becomes the next battlefield. You stand where salt air usually means trade, and now it means danger. Romans begin building a mole, an ugly stone finger pushing into your water, moving day by day, trying to seal the last breath the city has. You see the mole grow like a scar. You feel helplessness creep in because walls can stop ladders, but what stops stone in the sea? Work gangs shout. Roman engineers measure. Their discipline feels like a machine. But machines can be beaten by miracles when desperation fuels them. Therefore, a miracle begins in silence. Night covers the harbor, and you move like a thief inside your own city. You see laborers dig where nobody expects digging. You feel the ground vibrate with muffled strikes. You smell wet earth mixed with brine. The plan spreads through whispers. Cut a new channel. Build new ships behind the wall. Hide the heartbeat until it bursts. You don't know if the Romans already suspect. You don't know if a single informer sells the plan for a loaf of bread. But the work continues anyway. Therefore, secrecy becomes a weapon sharper than any spear. Timber disappears from warehouses. Iron nails vanish. Or stack in shadow. You see holes taking shape where there should be empty docks. You feel hope like an illegal thing, dangerous to hold, impossible to drop. Then the night arrives when the city dares to breathe. You stand on the wall and hear it first. The new channel opens. Water rushes like a released animal. You smell fresh-cut timber and pitch. You see black hulls slide forward, fresh oars dipping, a fleet borne behind stone. For one shining moment, the harbor looks like a rebirth. Therefore, hearts pound with something that feels like the world restarting. The fleet surges out, and you taste salt spray on lips as if it is victory. You hear Carthaginian shouts rise from every rooftop. But Rome adapts fast. Therefore, joy dies mid-breath. Roman ships pivot. Roman marines surge. The sea turns into a trap again, because the enemy learns your trick even as you celebrate it. You watch ships collide so close there is no room to swing a sword. Men hook holes with iron. Shields slam. Blades stab low between planks and ribs. You smell blood diluted by seawater, a sharp metallic stink carried on foam. Oars splinter. Men drown wearing armor that drags them down like a verdict. You don't know who survives, because smoke and shouting eat the view. Therefore, the harbor gamble becomes another wound. Inside the city, the war eats the rules. The line between civilian and soldier dissolves completely. You see a baker carry stones to the wall. You see an elder pour boiling liquid from a roof. You feel the city become a single organism that fights with any limb it has. Every rooftop becomes a fort. Every house becomes a wall. Therefore, you stop thinking in streets and begin thinking in choke points. But even a city organism needs breath. Food keeps shrinking. You feel the mouth water at the smell of anything edible, leather, boiled weeds, whatever can be chewed. You see men scrape it from pots and lick it because it once touched fat. It is not noble. It is survival stripped raw. But survival is stubborn. Therefore, the city holds on. Then a new name moves through whispers like a storm front. Scipio Aemilianus takes command. You do not see him yet. You feel him in the enemy's rhythm. The Romans stop making mistakes. Their patrols tighten. Their engineers work faster. Their assaults come at the worst possible times, when defenders sag with exhaustion. Therefore, the news stops slipping. Scipio's discipline changes the sound of the siege. Before, Roman camps feel noisy, almost casual. Now they feel quiet, like predators. You see fewer torches at night because they do not need them. You feel dread, because a quiet enemy usually means a competent one. The blockade becomes complete. The city's sea door closes. Therefore, hunger becomes not a condition, but a strategy used against you. You climb the walls and see fields beyond that you cannot reach. You smell distant cooking fires from Roman lines, and it makes the throat tighten with rage. But rage does not fill stomachs. Therefore, the city begins to eat itself. Furniture becomes fuel, ornaments become metal, pride becomes a ration. Days blur. The body learns new pains. You feel joints ache from constant climbing. You feel fingers split from gripping stone. You see bandages brown with old blood. But the wall still stands. Therefore you keep standing too. Then the year turns toward the final act. 146 BC arrives not like a calendar page, but like a change in air, a pressure that promises collapse. You feel it before you see it, because the sound changes. The city's roar becomes a single violent rhythm. Impact, scream, impact, like a giant hammer beating time. The breach opens somewhere, and the knowledge travels faster than runners. You sprint toward the noise, because if the breach widens, the city dies in minutes. You see defenders pouring into alleys, not in formation, but in urgency. You feel your weapon, rough wood, new metal, vibrate with each footfall. Smoke begins to clog the streets. Romans come through it in tight groups, shield first, stabbing low. You cannot see their faces. You only see iron edges and intent. Therefore the fight becomes intimate and ugly. There is no heroic plane, no clean line. Combat happens inside rooms, on stairs, over collapsed beams. You kick a door and it swings inward onto bodies. You smell burning oil, wet plaster, and the copper of blood. A Roman shield slams into a defender's chest. The defender folds. A Roman blade flashes. You hear a sound like someone biting into fruit, but it is flesh. You feel bile rise. But stopping means becoming a body in the doorway. Therefore you step over the fallen and swing. The Romans move like a machine that learns the house as it takes it. They shove forward, they rotate men, they keep pressure. But Carthage fights like a cornered animal. Therefore every landing becomes a trap. A pot drops from above. A stone cracks a helmet. A spear thrusts through a window frame. You don't know if it matters. You don't know if there are reserves behind you, or only frightened citizens holding kitchen knives. But the Romans keep coming. Therefore you retreat, not because you want to, but because the city loses space with every heartbeat. Fires ignite. The fog of war becomes literal. Alleys become tunnels of heat. You feel your eyebrows crisp. You taste ash grit between teeth. You hear wood crack and scream as roofs collapse. Somewhere a baby cries, thin, desperate, then nothing. You don't know if the silence means rescue or burial. Therefore you keep moving, because grief here is a luxury that kills. Scipio's men climb higher. They take rooftops and turn them into platforms for killing. You see them silhouette against flame, not as men, but as shapes that drop death downward. You feel stones in your hands, your last artillery. Your arms shake as you throw. A stone hits a shield and bounces uselessly. Another cracks a jaw. But for each Roman that falls, more take the space. Therefore exhaustion becomes the true enemy. You stab until your hand cramps. You feel the blade catch on bone, then free with a jerk that wrenches the wrist. You hear screams in languages that blur together. But the Romans do not panic. Therefore their advance keeps its rhythm, step by step, house by house. You retreat toward the Byrsa, the citadel, because there is nowhere else to retreat to. You see the hill crowded with bodies that still breathe, families, neighbors, the last reasons. They press forward even as they push you back. You feel their hands on your shoulders, not to comfort, but to force space that does not exist. The Byrsa becomes a funnel. Therefore everything jams. Fighters, crying children, elders clutching bundles that hold nothing useful. Someone tries to drag a chest of coins. The chest breaks open. Coins spill and vanish under feet because money means nothing when the air runs out. Romans surge up the approaches. You hear their horns cut through smoke. You see their shields lock. You feel terror sharpen into clarity. Victory is no longer the goal. Therefore, the next minute becomes the only territory left to hold. At stairways, defenders pile furniture to block. Romans set it on fire. Smoke pours upward like a hand squeezing a throat. You cough until the chest burns. You taste soot and spit black. A man beside you swings a club and misses. A Roman thrusts and the man drops without a sound. You feel warmth splash your forearm. But you cannot stop to look. Therefore you step into the gap and thrust back. The fighting climbs into sacred spaces. The temple area near Eshmun becomes not sanctuary, but final geometry, pillars, steps, dead ends. You see people look at the flame and then at the Romans and make a choice in their eyes before their bodies move. Some throw down weapons and raise empty hands. But empty hands do not guarantee mercy. Therefore, the surrender feels like a gamble with loaded dice. Others grab torches. They choose fire over chains. You smell hair burning, cloth igniting, pitch flaring. You hear a sound that is not a scream for help, but a scream for control, the last control left. You don't know which choice is braver. You don't know which choice is right. But the air runs out either way. Therefore, the world narrows to breath and decision. Romans push closer. Their shields shove. Their blades flash. You feel the press of bodies behind you and the press of enemies ahead. But there is no space to retreat. Therefore, the body does the only thing it can: fight, stumble, fight again. A roof collapses somewhere with a roar that shakes dust into your eyes. You blink through grit and see shapes moving in the murk. Are they defenders? Are they Romans? You don't know. Therefore, you swing at movement and hope it is the correct hope. Hours lose meaning. The city becomes sound, crackling wood, collapsing stone, metal striking metal, the wet slap of feet in blood. You feel your own heartbeat as a drum you cannot silence. But the Roman rhythm stays steady. Therefore, the end arrives not as a dramatic trumpet, but as depletion. The fighting stops not because you win, but because there is nothing left to fight with. Arms fail. Throats tear. Fires consume what walls defend. You see defenders drop weapons because fingers no longer close. You feel a numbness spread like cold water through the limbs. When the noise thins, the silence feels unnatural, like a room after a feast where the table sits overturned and empty. But the Romans still move. Therefore, the ending continues. You walk through what used to be streets and find the city reduced to evidence. Broken altars, snapped beams, black outlines where bodies fall. You smell ash so thick it coats the tongue. You see puddles that are not water. You feel the sting of flies gathering as if summoned by a bell. Survivors cluster in stunned knots. Some hold each other upright. Some stare without blinking. Romans tie wrists. Therefore, the future becomes a marketplace. You hear the word slavery without anyone needing to explain it. It sits in the air like a weight. The Romans dismantle a rival into profit. You see hands pry stones from walls not to rebuild but to erase. You feel the insult deepen because even rubble becomes a resource for the conqueror. Somewhere, a rumor forms that refuses to die. They sow salt so nothing grows. You cannot verify it. You cannot see every field. You cannot read the future. But standing in ash, you understand why people believe it. Therefore, salt becomes the image the mind reaches for when it needs a word for irreversible. The verdict arrives as a sensation more than a statement. You feel it in the way the wind carries no market noise, no dock shouts, no prayers, only crackle and collapse. Carthage stops being a place and becomes a warning. The cost is counted not by numbers spoken aloud, but by absence felt in every step. Homes that do not answer, names that nobody calls, laughter that never returns. Therefore, the city's death teaches a method. A state discovers it can win by deleting a city, breaking the economy, breaking the walls, breaking the population, breaking the memory. Now the modern mirror slides into view without changing the smell of smoke in your nose. You hear today's language: unconditional surrender, shock and awe, blockade, strategic bombing, total mobilization, and you recognize the logic because you live its early blueprint here. Technology changes, but the impulse does not. Therefore, the crime scene stays the same, the moment a war stops being about territory and starts being about erasure. You feel the temptation that always returns in every age: remove the rival completely and call it peace. But peace built on deletion demands more deletions. Therefore, the pattern repeats in new uniforms, new slogans, new maps. The legacy question stands in your mouth like ash you cannot spit out. Imagine your city, your neighborhood, your home. Now imagine an enemy offering safety in exchange for disarmament, then demanding disappearance. You see how fast normal life can be turned into a furnace. You feel how quickly choices shrink until only terrible options remain. So, what becomes the line that refuses to move, the line drawn in fear or the line drawn in dignity? But if dignity means flame and survival means chains, therefore what does courage even mean when the world offers only endings? If the next case file matters, follow this archive, because history does not repeat, but it leaves fingerprints, and those fingerprints still smudge the present.